This was once the sound of a gold rush, liquid gold, mānuka honey.
Every drop of our mānuka honey holds the story of its origin.
Marketed as a unique New Zealand story.
From here, the honey is bottled, packed and sent out to you around the world.
But now it's in a crisis.
There have been beekeepers that have gone out of business.
Price dumping.
Price dumping, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're
just sort of...
seeing massive discounts.
Welcome to the NBR Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Shepherd. It promised so much, a unique story, healing properties, and so mānuka honey was deemed liquid gold. The prices hiked and people piled into the industry. But now that industry is in crisis. In a moment, we'll talk to the CEO of Comvita, our largest listed honey company, about why he used that crisis word. And then the woman who represents the beekeepers. But first, NBR journalist Kate Bigvicker, who has been covering the honey industry, is here to give us some context. Kate, if you could describe to me that the industry initially started off with a boom. It was like a gold rush.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I mean, commercialisation sort of started in the 1990s and it sort of grew from there in the sort of 2010s, I guess. But from about 2019, you probably started to see a bit of an overstock and so that honey gluts and things like that. And so markets sort of started to change a wee bit.
So people piled into the industry and then it was just too much being done.
Exactly. So you've got a lot of hobbyists and then you've also got the commercial players as well.
Right, okay.
So commercial players are technically anyone who's got more than 51 hives or 50-50 sort of one onwards.
Right, okay. So how would you describe the challenges now? I mean, there's the oversupply. Are people going out of business? How would you describe it?
Yeah, well, essentially, I mean, you have more players, you get more honey as well. You've also got weather plays a factor as well. So if you get a really good season, then everyone wants that honey, so they put it into storage. And honey can last a really long time as well.
Yeah, people don't really realise that it has a long shelf life.
Exactly, quite a few years. And so you've actually got a lot backing up in storage as well. So if you go through a few seasons where you get good weather and the bees are happy, you get a lot of honey.
Yeah.
And so that all banks up. So that creates those honey gluts that we were just talking about before.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but the industry really did grow a lot, and we actually have a couple of listed players now. Tell me about them.
Yeah, okay. So you've got Me Today, which is sort of a skincare wellness supplements brand, and they brought into the Mānuka honey market around 2021.
Yep.
And they purchased King Honey for about $36 million.
Was King Honey a Mānuka producer?
They're sort of a local honey producer.
Yep.
And then you've also got Comvita as well. So Comvita has been around since about the 70s. And they're a really large player as well.
Okay. Comvita, how have they been handling this? I mean, how are they doing?
Mm-hmm. If you actually look at Comvita's share price over the last 5 years, they're pretty steady, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's they had a real boom in around the 2020s. And if you think back to that time, that's around the same time as the pandemic, right? So you've got a lot of emphasis on health, well-being, people looking after themselves and things like that. But at the end of last year, things took a bit of a turn.
Right.
And so the share price started dropping off a wee bit. And then in about April, May this year, things really took a dive.
Okay.
And so that actually coincided with the same time that there was a non-binding takeover bid. And that actually fell through.
Okay.
And so that falling over really, I guess, hurt shareholder confidence. And from there, we've seen a bit of a decline.
Yep.
Just looking at my notes here, the year-to-date share price has dropped 56%, or if you look at a year-on-year basis, nearly 62%.
So 62%, that's a massive drop. So shareholders, as you say, have lost a lot of confidence in the company. Are they doing anything about it?
I mean, that's a reduction in the share price has led to a lot of changes, including a new CEO coming on.
Right, and this is the CEO who has labelled the industry as being in a crisis. Isn't that right?
And he's actually a familiar face for people for Comvita.
So let's talk to that familiar face at Comvita.
I was the chief executive for 10 years, from 2005 through to 2015. So
Yeah.
that was at the peak of the gold rush era, if you like, for Mānuka honey.
Brett Hewlett is once again the CEO.
So this is the second or third probably major change that we've seen in the industry. So I'm very confident we'll get through this one again.
Why is the New Zealand honey industry in a crisis?
Well, I guess this has been something that's been building for quite a few years. We've often referred to Mānuka honey as sort of being the growth period has been the gold rush era for Mānuka honey, which is probably through the early 2000s into the lead up to 2020, really.
So lots of people coming in, and so building a capacity, and as a result, does that mean there is now oversupply?
Yeah, that has been the case. Look, I think that build up through to 2019, 2020, it actually peaked in 2019, was on the back of hugely rapidly growing demand and the premiumization of Mānuka honey, led by a number of brands, including our own, that were out there sort of pioneering the story of Mānuka honey, especially around its wound healing properties and some of those other therapeutic properties, investing in science, investing in building capability to deliver a good consumer outcome. So as that built, that demand grew, I think the oversupply just got out of balance. There was a lot of people that were able to participate in selling Mānuka honey, but didn't really have the ability to follow through and ensure that they had consumer loyalty. Comvita, as the leading brand, is the most premium brand in most markets, especially in Asian markets. We've typically enjoyed price premiums of 20 to 30%. But we're now seeing that prices are being discounted very, very heavily by a lot of these sort of new entry brands, and some of the older ones, to be fair, at 50%, even 100% cheaper than Comvita's standard offering. Okay,
well, that market has obviously flowed through into Comvita's performance. It reflects all this. The revenue is down by 30 million, loss after tax impairments 77 million. What's your plan? How are you going to turn it around?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think that's quite a challenge. Obviously, I'm enjoying being back at the helm, but it does come back to the challenge that we have operating a premium brand, pushing into premium markets, developing a reputation for New Zealand's high quality food exports. When back here in New Zealand, we've got a highly unregulated industry, which is prone to see a lot of different players come and go, very fragmented industry,
right.
A degree of lack of professionalism being demonstrated at some levels in the industry. And that's going to be rather problematic.
So if you had more regulation and sort of a unified kind of industry in New Zealand, it would bode well for getting into those markets and maintaining a premium price.
Yes, it absolutely would. Yeah, exactly. And look, we'll be able to survive through this as a brand, but right now we're trying to hold a line as much as we can on that premium price positioning. We've worked very hard. It's taken us 20 years to build a position, for example, in the China market. And in the Asian markets for that premium brand positioning for Mānuka honey, and to build a reputation on the back of New Zealand Inc., really, as a food exporter.
Okay, so you have been travelling to those markets, I understand. Let's talk about the major ones. You just referenced China. It's the biggest honey market, but it is down markedly. What is the potential impact for Comvita if the Chinese economy doesn't really recover soon or recover its appetite for Comvita honey?
Yeah, look, I'm less concerned around the general state of the economy in China. Let's face it, China is still conservatively estimated to be growing at between 4 and 5%, GDP growth per annum. So I'm not worried about the general state of the economy in a market like China.
Right.
In fact, rather excited by the opportunities there.
Okay.
I am concerned around the state of our industry back here and the impact that's having on key markets there.
Okay, what about America, New Zealand's biggest export market for Mānuka honey? How are you doing in America at the moment?
Yeah, look, America's the biggest market for honey in general, and it has become now the biggest market in volume terms for Mānuka honey. Tragically, it's also the cheapest honey market in the world. So, Yeah, prices of Mānuka honey have been impacted probably over the last 2 to 3 years, severely by, again, more and more aggressive competition, participation by big box retailers that have tried to try and build a more commoditized version of Mānuka honey. It's not renowned for its niche premium branding, and so it has become a bit of a war zone, to be perfectly honest, North American market.
A bit of a war zone. What does the future hold? We are having a change in president who is talking about 10 to 20% potential tariffs on all countries. Do you fear that?
Look, I think that's going to be an interesting time ahead of us for sure. And if we look at around where we might want to choose to play around the world and look at the options, and this is true for all New Zealand exporters. The US still represents a massive opportunity. It still is the biggest consumer market in the world. There are still vast opportunities to participate at various levels there. It will be an interesting time ahead of us, but look, we can't speculate just yet on what that's going to look like.
All right, so tough times for Comvita. You've declined to provide financial guidance for the future year. You say your focus is on survival. It does sound a little bleak.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be so bleak. It's very much a short-term perspective. Right now, there is a need to sort of hold that line and preserve our position. Clearly, we had been gearing up for significant growth. We were experiencing double-digit growth through the early 20s, through the COVID years. We had invested for growth. We had a lot of sunk cost involved in building capability back here in New Zealand in order to deliver to this growth. And then the handbrake's been pulled on rather sharply.
Brett Hewlett has an export focus, but did mention tough times for those who produce the honey, the beekeepers.
I'd say that the beekeepers have found it particularly hard.
Karen Koss is from Apiculture New Zealand. She represents the beekeepers.
Undoubtedly, they are finding it tougher, and we've certainly seen a drop. I mean, even if I look at the Hive numbers, I think that explains a lot. In 2019, we had over 900,000 hives. To date, September this year, we've got 519,000. So you can see there's been a considerable drop in hive numbers, and there's also been beekeepers leaving the industry. Since 2019, the number of operators with 1,000 to 3,000 hives have fallen by nearly a third. So that's certainly telling you something's going on in the industry.
Yeah, so a third less there, and the number of actual hives, down by almost a half.
Yes, yeah.
So those years of the gold rush and when the industry was getting started, well and truly over.
Yeah.
What about this issue that's related to the oversupply, price dumping? What do you know about that?
Look, I do hear I've heard anecdotally of price dumping. I don't have any strong evidence, but certainly I think when you've got a lot of stock sitting in the system and there's opportunity to sell the product, people are going to do that. It's not what we'd like to see, obviously, but we understand that it's very tough times for people who still have to pay to run the business. The costs of business have increased, the cost of compliance have increased. So there's been a lot of factors that add to some behaviours that we wouldn't like to see.
Yeah, that's right. And so price dumping just basically means that they're undercutting or decreasing the price in the overseas markets by putting bulk supply out there.
Look, bulk supply has been interesting. Even though people talk about bulk supply, our records suggest that bulk supply has decreased over the last year. So the numbers don't quite match up. And when we look at the export revenue and we look at it's up on 2020. It's up on 2023, even though it's below on 2024. So there's 2022. So there's still some good sales going on. There's still export as revenue has actually grown, and the average price for New Zealand honey as at July 2024 was $40.14 per kg. and that was compared to 38.74 per kg in 2023. So it's not all doom and gloom. So I'm not saying it's not challenging, because it absolutely is, and it's been very, very difficult for the beekeepers that I talk to. Exporters, I think, is more of a mixed bag, but it's certainly they're certainly telling us they're seeing some behaviours in the marketplace that are concerning.
Right, okay. Is there any way to address that, though? Because there's no real regulation around this industry, is there?
So I think that's the whole point of us launching the honey strategy this year. So a couple of years ago, Apiculture New Zealand, we're the industry good body, started to see some of the issues around an environment that had really got out of control. Far too many hives, concerns around the quality of honeys, that kind of stuff. So we went and moved to look at, well, what could we do about it? How could we reset the industry? What was important to us? And I think fundamentally, there needs to be a bit of growing up in the marketplace, in the sector.
Yep.
We've got to be better organised as an industry, so industry body included. We've got to try and get some mandatory funding in place. We're one of the few primary sectors.
Yeah, what would the mandatory funding be for?
So initially we'd be looking at something like an export levy.
Okay.
So, for example, we're looking at a horticultural export authority levy, and that sets some rules around the marketing strategy. It has a licensing program, and we think that's a really good way to try and bring a bit more self-discipline to the industry and try and start to address some of those issues. We're dealing with the realities of a really difficult international market. An industry that has absolutely grown too much. I mean, 1 million hives really effectively in 2019, too many hives. So this is the very, very painful correction at the end of all of this.
The industry has now set itself some goals to have a unified voice, a unique marketing presence, and a 2030 goal of achieving $1 billion in earnings. If it gets there, does that mean it's weathered the current crisis? Let's go back to Brett Hewlett from Comvita.
Yeah, look, I think this honey glut that's been referred to, I think we've probably got a year or two to go before that's sort of cleared away. And then we're going to see beekeepers and the whole industry go through another reset where we start to see, perhaps even see a return to supply shortage.
Finally, though, do you think Mānuka honey will ever be seen again as liquid gold?
Look, I think it's never really lost its complete shine, but at the premium end, for more value-add opportunities, higher UMFs, and also other formats which take honey and present it in medical applications or therapeutic applications, that's where the opportunity really lies, and that's where Comvita will be pursuing with a vengeance to get back to that position for itself.
And that wraps up this episode of the NBR Podcast. Links to audio used are in the show notes. Thanks to content producer Jake Latham, and for early access to new episodes, subscribe at nbr.co.nz. Next week, IBM, Microsoft, Apple, Xero, Steve Vamos has been a leader in all of them, and he has some things to say. I'm Simon Shepherd. We'll catch you then.